Imagine getting up every day full of energy as if you were in your 20s again. What would that be like? What would it be worth to you? What is your health worth to you? Think about it. Your health isn't everything, but without it, everything else is nothing. And yet, too many of us are taking it for granted until something goes wrong. And no one wakes up hoping to be diagnosed with a disease or chronic illness. And yet, we've never been taught how to be proactive in our health through our school or public health. As a registered health coach and integrative health practitioner, I believe it's time this information is made available to everyone. Combining new knowledge around your health and the ability to do my functional medicine lab tests in the comfort of your own home will allow you to optimize your health for today and all your tomorrows. Don't wait for your wake-up call. Welcome back to another episode of the Don't Wait for Your Wake-Up Call podcast. And as you know, this month has been talking about personal growth. That is the theme. And I have another fabulous guest for you here, Chad Nedland, and he is the author of the Be Better book. And we're going to dive into his journey and how he came to writing that book. So welcome, Chad. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much. It's actually the book on being better.
The book on being better.
The book on being better. Somebody asked me one time, they said, so what are you going to name the book? Or what'd you write the book about? I said, well, it's the book on being better. And they're like, yeah, what'd you name it? I'm like, no, it's the book on being better. And they're like, well, how are people going to find that? I was like, well, anytime they're looking up a book on being better, it should show up in a search engine. And they're like, that'll never work. I'm like, look it up.
And there you go.
It shows right there.
That's the great acronym, BOB, so people can remember it. Book on being better. So I apologize, I got the name wrong.
No, it's good. Right. It's just that much more fun.
So tell us. How did it come to be? You're a fun guy. You tell stories. Yeah. You got your little name there, Assimilation Story Framework. You teach, you coach through stories. So share your story.
Absolutely. My story is varied. It's got highs and darks and lows and ups and downs and everything in between. And ultimately,
you're just a normal guy.
Yeah, that's what makes the average everyday person normal. Is we all go through these struggles. The question is, how do we assign meaning to those things in our lives? And I started with what a lot of people don't have. Two parents who absolutely loved me. They just cherished all three of us, which is three boys. I was the youngest of three. And we had varied interests. If you would find me in one of two places, I would be in a hole climbing in something. Or if I was really lost, you would find me at the very top of a tree with the skinniest branch just waving in the wind. And I literally would climb until I heard the branches start to break. But I love being outdoors. I love to explore and to see new things and to gain different perspectives. I found out that I had like 90 different yards when I was a kid because the yard was completely different depending on what I was sitting on. It was a whole different world. And with an imagination like mine, I could see castles and cowboys and Indians and, all of the things a kid could see, but I got to see it based on where I was and how I perceived the world based on my circumstance. And then I had another brother and he liked to borrow things that weren't his in the neighborhood. And then he would carve his initials in windowsills. So we were immediately loved in our neighborhood as a child. And then my oldest brother, he liked fire. He liked to burn things like people's barns and their sheds. And so we had parents that loved me in communities that hated us because of my brothers. I used to go to things and my teachers referred to me as brother of a thief during roll call. Oh. They wouldn't even address me by name. Small communities, they can be very loving and they can also be very brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned that it was better to not connect with people because then I wouldn't be hurt when we moved. And we moved a lot. No, my dad was not in the military, but he would move to another state for a 3-cent raise.
Right.
Because it was something it was more. And he always wanted to be able to give us more and he wanted to love us more and show us more. And in so doing, ministry for my parents seemed like it took precedent over us as their children. Now, as I look older now and I look at why they did the things they did, man, I fully support their decisions now. But as a child, I felt neglected. I felt unloved, uncared for. I was second to everything else. And it got me to really start looking at things deeply. When I hit junior high, I started, like every young man does in junior high, I started studying psychology and economics. Because everybody does that, right?
Don't they?
And well, with my parents, it's not like I had a love life on the side. It was school and home. If you want
Right.
to play with your dog in the backyard. You don't go run with the pack, right? And it got me really interested in how the mind works, the psychology behind it. Why do we do the things we do? More important to me is, why are my parents doing what they're doing? It's like, I love them dearly. Why do I feel so unloved? And it wasn't a fault of my parents. It was a learned behavior that my parents had. They loved me in the way that they knew how, in the best way that they could, based on what they knew.
And that's so often what happens. We parent the way we were parented, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I said, there's got to be a better way for this. And I started digging deep. And I wanted to grow up and be a youth pastor. My one brother wanted to be in the military, and the other one wanted to be a truck driver. I wanted to be a youth pastor. Yeah, not a firefighter. I wanted to be a youth pastor. So right out of high school, I went into the Army. My brothers couldn't. They had records. I went into the Army, absolutely loved it, excelled in everything that I did in the military. When I got out, I ended up starting in as a household mover. I spent years going over the road with trucks, moving people. And eventually I ended up back where I was preaching from the pulpit and helping youth. So ultimately, I got to fulfill all three of our dreams in my life. And I said, wow, this is pretty cool. In my 20s. Now what? So I took a walk. I went from Minneapolis to California, and I took a short little walk. That turned into a 7-year journey where I traveled all over the US by foot and worked in homeless camps. And my whole goal was to just bring them hope. Most people don't realize you don't end up homeless because you want to be homeless. Something happened, you end up homeless, and you end up staying homeless only when you lose hope.
Right.
So I got to show up in same dirty clothes, same lack of belongings, same position, same place, same situation and circumstance, but I was fully joy.
Right.
And it made people ask, like, what is so different about you? And I said, do you really want to know? They're like, yeah. I was like, are you sure? They go, yeah, man. What's so different about you? I said, well, ask me tomorrow. And I turn around and walk off. Because when I learned that when you make people really want to know something, and then you make them pursue it, they value it when they have it. And I learned this from my grandpa.
Smart man.
He said, he says, your cousins take the 22 and they go out there and they shoot all the squirrels and rabbits. He says, and you just let them run off into the woods. He says, I'm going to show you how to snare a rabbit. And I tell you, that first rabbit that I got, I brought home, and I was so proud. I field dressed it, I cleaned it, we cooked it, we ate it. I was so proud of that. And that's when he reminded me, he says, and see, your cousins still just let them die in the woods. He says, but you found value in what you did because you had to pursue it. You had to be persistent. You had to put the work in. And I was like, wow, there is so much there. And my grandpa used to teach me all these little lessons. He wasn't a cold man. He didn't laugh much. He was a very stern person. Right. But I never understood.
Very common in that era.
Yeah. I never understood the depth of the lessons that he taught me until I got older. Right. And a lot of those lessons you'll actually find in the book on Being Better. And I tell story to share those principles. Well, some of the lessons that I learned was like in the military about finding our beginning. We did land navigation in order to figure out where you're going and how to get there and plot your course. There's 3 things that you had to know. You had to know your start point. You had to know your end point. and you had to know the terrain in between.
Right.
And once you knew all three of those, you could plot the most effective course to get you wherever it is that you're going. Lack any one of those three, and you're going to die of starvation, dehydration, or the wild.
Right.
And I thought, how much more is our life just like that?
Mm-hmm.
Too many people say, give me the framework, give me the plan, give me a business plan, give me an idea, give me something to follow because I want more. And you're like, well, what exactly is it that you want? And they're like, more money. I said, how much? Well, 10 grand. I'm like, 10 grand a month, another 10,000 before you die, 10K a year. What do you want? You have to get clear on that desire. And they're like, well, I just need more money than I have now. And I'm like, go stand in the corner, ask for it. You'll end up with more. And they didn't understand until something I started doing with people to impress this point, as I would tell them, just like I'm going to tell your audience right now,
Mm-hmm.
if you come to my home, I will feed you like royalty. I will keep you well housed, well fed, and well entertained for an entire week, and give you complete coaching in wherever you are in your business for an entire week, solid and straight. All you got to do is just come to my home, walk up to my porch, knock twice on the door, and come on in the house. You don't even have to wait for me to answer. Just come on in. So all you need to do is go north 13 miles and take a right at the first T in the road. When you hit that T, I want you to go through town, down, up a hill. Immediately, you'll find another road. Take a left, follow it 3/4 of a mile. You'll see a white picket fence. Go to the next driveway, take a right. That's my house. So, with those directions, anybody who wants to, come on up. A lot of people go, oh, that's so exciting. And they get all worked up about this. The smart ones go 13 miles from where?
Exactly.
Without the start point, the best, most descriptive directions and plan will not get you to your destination. I mean, there's a chance, but it's 1 in a billion.
Exactly.
You'd be better off having no plan and just walking aimlessly through life than to have a specific plan and no start point.
Right.
So we says, well, I gotta find a way to make sure that people understand this principle, that they have to have that start point. They have to know their beginning in life. And it's not, where are you at physically, but where are you at in your life? If it's business, where are you at in your business? If it's your relationship, where are you at in your relationship? If it's your personal development, identify where you're at. Be so brutally honest that you would be embarrassed if you walked into the room and overheard yourself. Like, be so raw, because if you're not completely honest with where you're starting, you'll never actually get anywhere solid, because you'll be building on a false foundation. And so now that we have that, we have to know the end game, right? Like, where do we want to be? Somebody says, I want to lose weight. Okay, how much? I don't know. I'm just, I need to lose some weight. All right, well, take your shoes off.
True enough.
You're lighter, right?
Yeah.
We're good. Here, don't drink an extra glass of water a day. You'll be lighter, slightly dehydrated and miserable, but you'll be lighter. There's little things. It's like, if you don't know what your outcome is, your goal, then you can't work towards it. Once we have that, then we have to make sure. This is my favorite lesson, was my grandpa. Actually, he taught me a lot of lessons around the right tools, but one of my favorite is, we were going to make birdhouses. We do a lot of wood crafting, and to this day, we still do a lot of wood crafting in my house. But we were going to make some birdhouses, and we went out to the wood shop. He's like, all right. He says, well, I need holes in all of the fronts of the birdhouses. And he cut all the pieces ahead of time. He's like, I need holes for all the birds to come in. And he handed me this stack of boards, and he handed me a chisel. And so he's over there working on other stuff, and I'm this young kid, and I'm just gouging away, and I'm digging these holes. And finally I get one through, and I look over at Grandpa, and he's just sitting there cross-armed over his lap, just watching me. And I came over, and I was so proud. I was like, I got it, Grandpa. I got it all the way through. Is it big enough? He goes, that's perfect. Good job, Jarek. Because it was Chris, Eric, and Chad. So he always just called all of us Jarek. Good job, Jarek. And I was like, thanks, Grandpa. And he goes, we don't have time. And he says, hold on. And he picks up the other 5. He walks over to the drill press, sets them in there, goes, done. 5 more holes, done, just like that. And he looked at me and he goes, you can accomplish most anything you set your mind to if you work hard enough and long enough. but sometimes it just makes sense to ask for the right tool. And all I could think was, you're such a jerk. And now I spend my life going, what's a tool I could use to make that more effective?
Right.
What tools do I have at my disposal? Because that lesson changed everything about how I do life, how I do business, how I do my relationships with my wife, my kids, my parents. There's a toolbox that we have. And most people never take the time to open up that toolbox and say, what skills do I have? What resources do I have that I can apply to this situation or circumstance? And because of that, most people are stuck there with a chisel and a board, never knowing how to use the right tool for the task. So when we understand that principle and say there are tools at our disposal and they're there, although we're not accessing them, I learned that I had developed an immense amount of skills in the military, in the wood shops, traveling.
Mm-hmm.
But when you looked at my life, I seemed unsuccessful. And I realized that my dad would move us for 3 cents and then move us a few months later for a penny or two more, or a slight change or a better opportunity or something that had more potential. No promise, just potential or possibility. And I realized that we always moved for the potential and the possibility, but we never pursued the result.
Right.
And I realized that as I was looking through life, I'm like, you know what? I got tired of where I was, so I walked to California. Why did I walk? Because the night before, no joke, my brother and I were sitting around smoking something we shouldn't have. We'll just leave it at that. He's like, what you going to do tomorrow? I was like, I don't know. Walk to California, I guess. He was like, all right, let me know when you get there. And we sat there for another half an hour, 45 minutes or so. And I went to bed. In the morning, I got up. I was tired, worn out. It was a long night. And I was like, well, he told me, or I told him I was going to go to California. And the words of my grandfather ran through my head. He says, a man is only as good as his word. If you don't have that, what are you? And I was like, if I don't have that, I'm a lie. I had no choice but to walk to California. It wasn't a whim. I made a statement. And as a man, I had to be a man of integrity. So I walked. And I continued to walk. And I walked all of my excuses out of my life. Once you've gone to East Coast and West Coast 5 times on foot, there's really nothing you look at in life and go, I don't know if I can do that. You're like, it sure was easier than walking across Arizona. You start thinking things like that, and all of a sudden you get a different perspective. And I realized that what had to shift wasn't my situation. It wasn't my circumstance. It wasn't my resources. It wasn't my skills. It was my thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I had to learn to think differently, because the way that I had been thinking was in complete alignment with the way that I was raised. And like you said, we parent how we were parented. We love how we were loved. We do life how we see others do life. And then I thought, wait, if I continue to do life the way that my dad did life, I'm feeling exactly what my children will feel when they get my age. I'm feeling it right now, and I don't want that for them. I've got to do life different. I've got to think different. I've got to perceive things different. How do I go about doing that? And so I started studying people who they were seeing things that were successful in their life. And I don't believe success is making X amount of money per month or having this type of car, this type of house or prestige. I actually really enjoy Earl Nightingale's version of success. He says it's a pursuit of any worthwhile goal.
Mm-hmm.
And when I heard that for the first time, I'm like, I am a success. I'm not trying to achieve success. I am a success because I'm pursuing something worthwhile.
Right.
That's what makes me successful. And the interesting thing happened when I started to see myself as successful. I started to succeed at things in my life. And I realized it's a decision. And if you take the root word of decision, it's desio, which means to cut off or sever. It's actually a Latin term used in surgery, to cut off and sever. Like when you make a decision, You cut off all other options, and that's what must happen. So I decided that I was going to be a world changer and an impact maker. I was deciding that I was the man who was going to find the key in my life that was going to help me to achieve all the things that I set out to accomplish. And as I studied some of the greats, and I studied individuals, I studied cultures, and I found that there were some interesting things between cultural growth, emotional growth, and economics. A lot of them are the same principles. Didn't matter where you put them, they just worked. And so I started applying some of these principles in my life. Like, we all know the power of compounding effect. If you put your money in the bank and every month they give you compounding interests here in America, after 20 years, you'll have an extra 20 bucks, you know, but the compounding in its truest form says it increases, and then we multiply your increase.
Right.
And every time we do it, we multiply the increase. So a 10% compounding is different than a 10% increase each month. If you put $100 in the bank and you get a 10% increase on your investment, that means the first month you have $110. Your second month you have $120. Mm-hmm. But with compounding, you have $100, then you have $110, then you have $121, then you have $123 or $33. So it starts to compound and grow. And I says, well, if that's true, how many other areas in our life is this applicable? Because mm-hmm. I've seen some crossover. Mm-hmm. And one example of a compounding interest and how we grow physically in our bodies is I had a good friend. He was about 9 inches shorter than me, and he came in at about 370 pounds. And he says, man, I gotta do something. I gotta get stronger. I gotta lose some weight. And I said, well, just start with a push-up. He goes, push-up? He said, I can barely get up. And I said, well, I didn't say get on the floor. And I says, just every day after you get up, stand in your doorway, turn sideways, put your hand on the door, lower yourself down, and push yourself back up. I said, just do that once a day. He's like, that's it? What good's that going to do? I says, do it for 10 days and you tell me. I wasn't trying to help him get stronger or lose weight. I was trying to teach him the power of creating a positive habit of making the effort. Mm-hmm. 6 days later, he calls me up. He's all excited. You'd think he was a kid that just found the secret key to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. He's like, Chad, dude, I got to share this with you. And I'm like, what's up? He's like, dude, you wouldn't believe it. I'm like, what? He goes, I did too. And I'm like, awesome. You did what too? I'm like, what are you talking? He's like, no, I did 2 push-ups. Within a month, he had done 6 push-ups on the wall. Now, a lot of people are probably not really grasping this, but when you can barely move mm-hmm. on your own strength mm-hmm. and you're able to do a specific exercise 6 times in a row, which is something you've never done before. This is huge for him. It is huge. It was such a massive change. And he's like, how did you know that was going to happen? And I just smiled and I looked at him. I says, yeah, I didn't. I says, I can never guarantee someone else's outcome. I can just guarantee that I can give you a tool. I says, and that's the tool that I used to run 20 miles. He goes, well, how'd you do 20 miles? I says, I got up in the morning, I ran as far as I could, and then I collapsed in the ditch. He goes, you went 20 miles and collapsed? I was like, no, I went about 1/8 of a mile because I hadn't run for years. And I says, and the next morning I got up and I ran as far as I could. And I did that every day, day after day after day. And one day I had made it up to about 14 miles and I got up and I told myself, I says, I will not hit the ditch. He goes, what happened? I says, I finished 20 miles that day. He's like, how long you been doing that? I says, I ran 20 miles that day. That was it. Now I run when I want to run because I showed myself that I can. But that all came with that compounding. I wasn't starting from square one. You'd never start at square one. Once you've taken a step, you can never go back to not having that step. And I was like, awesome. That's a principle. I applied it in my health. I applied it in my fitness, my mental wealth, my mental health. my
And
business,
mental wealth.
and mental wealth. Yeah.
Your brain is an asset after all.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything that I started to apply this to, I started to see this massive growth. And this curve wasn't an angle. It was a whoop. All of a sudden it would just start to just shoot up. Like all of a sudden you'd hit a certain point and you're like, dude, this is easy. Now I can just make it happen. And that was exciting to me. And then somebody introduced me to the Pareto principle, which is the 80-10 or the 80-20, the 90-10, the 99-1. You know, everybody wants to create their own thing to make it new. And really, his Pareto principle was never about 80% and 20%. He says there's a disparity, a difference in percentage versus outcome. That's it.
Right.
And as he studied, he found that this disparity, this formula, was that there is a very small portion of producers who controlled the majority of an outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then he started to study deeper. And then other people jumped in the bandwagon and said, how many other areas does this work in? And there was an insurance company. They went from the individual locations all the way to the top of this entire nationwide corporation here in America. And they took the top 20% of the earners, and they found out that the top 20% of each of these individual pods created about 80% of the revenue that was coming in.
Right.
So they took that top 20% and they did the math, and they found that the top 20% of those people controlled 80% of the income that was brought in as a whole. And they did this all the way up till they only had 20 people. They had zeroed it down that far. And out of the 20 people that were at the very top of the top of the top of the top,
only
2
4
people brought home 96% of all the revenue generated.
Wow.
And when you start applying this and you're saying, you know what, if a very small portion of my activities are responsible for 80% of the outcome, and I focus on the 20% of the lowest quality activity, 80% of the results in my life will be negative.
Mm-hmm.
It's not focus on the top 20 and get 80%. It's like, what 20% are you focused on? Because that will control what is the 80% of results that you experience. So I learned through this, it's like, you know what? I don't want to focus on the first 20%. And when I get done, go on to the next. I just says, I'm going to focus on that first 20%. And then I'm going to do that first 20% again and again and again until the day is over. Well, that worked for a while until I realized that if I just do the one thing, if today I could accomplish only one thing and it would make the greatest advance in my business, what one thing must I do today? And absolutely nothing else existed until that point. And I found that I could do it within the first 3 to 4 hours of my day. And then I figured out how to get it done in the first 2 hours of my day. Now, I usually have a full 8-hour workday done before most people get up and start. And I have the whole day to choose to do whatever I want to do, whether it be working with clients, whether it be like today, I just took 5 hours off and we went grocery shopping. Just got to go hang out with the kids and play in the little cart and throw stuff in and just spend time with my family, because I realized instead of spending 8 hours, I could spend a couple hours in the morning, do the thing that's going to move the needle the most in my business, and then do what's really important, which is love my children in a way that I never felt loved myself.
Right.
Because I have to change their story. See, the beauty of story is when we tell a story and our story becomes their story, then our lessons become their lessons, our beliefs become their beliefs. So if I just redo the story that I lived, my children will be me. But if I change the story, I change their outcome. And that's the power that we have, especially as parents. And I never leave that out because that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I started to realize that everything I was doing, it affected other people. And I started thinking about a ripple, because I'm a water guy. I love being in the water. I love camping. I love hiking and boating. And I realized if I take a rock and I throw it in a pool It's different than if I take the rock and I throw it at the bank of a creek. If I throw it at the bank, it's going to make a dent. It's going to make a deep impact. It's going to make a difference for about 15 minutes. And then the water is going to shift and it's just going to go away. But on the other hand, if I take a rock and I throw it in the middle of a pool, that one rock, that ripple, that wave will touch every grain of sand on the bank all the way around the entire pond. And I thought, wow, that's our life, because we're in a pool of human beings. Everything that I say has a direct impact on everyone around me, and it will not be unchanged. You cannot come in contact with me and walk away unchanged, because I will be a stimulus in your life. You know, that was my decision. I will be an impact maker. I will change lives for the better. I will give people the tools and the resources and the perspective. I will help them change their story. And as a result, I realized that there's a simple concept. I call it the 1 to a million. And this 1 to a million literally means before I die, I will talk to 1,000 people that I have not yet met. And there's a good chance that every single one of them will talk to 1,000 people before they die. And that means that every single conversation that I have, I will be impacting at least 1 million lives with every single conversation. It made me become extremely intentional about what I chose to say, where I chose to show up, what podcast I chose to say yes to, which ones I say no to, because I know every decision I make, every word I say is going to impact millions of people. Because I'm going to teach my kids how to move forward, and they're going to carry those same messages. They're just going to do it more powerfully than I did, because they're going to learn what I learned throughout my life at the beginning of theirs.
Right. They get it all that much younger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that aspect is what I taught so many people over and over again is know your start point, know your end game, plan a route, make sure you have the right tools, and then be consistent. Consistently show up, consistently apply the effort in all areas of your life. And you'll find that that compounds over and over again. And as that compounds, it intensifies, and that intensifies the ripple. You'll realize that you're no longer a ripple maker. You're the one who makes waves and then rides it into oblivion, because you create something that other people can actually just hijack and join you in. And then you do that powerfully in a positive way. And I started doing that in my life, and I've helped people out of addiction, working with people coming out of addiction. And we do that through paddles. I guess we're on a podcast, so showing them won't help. But we used to take old reclaimed lumber, and we would make paddles. And we sold the paddles. They were decorative paddles all the way up to, I've got an 8-foot oar here. But we would show them at the beginning. We'd be like, people say this is an old, dead, thrown out piece of wood, and we'd want to get rid of it because they say it has no value. But with a pattern, framework, and I'd sit here and I'd be drawing out the stencil on there. I says a little bit of work, trimming away the things that don't need to be there, and I'd be cutting off the excess, and a little bit of shape and a little bit here. Over the course of about 7 minutes, I'd talk them through this process of me making these little paddles. And I don't have a short one next to me. We'd make these paddles, and by the time we got to the end, we'd have this freshly dipped and lacquered paddle hanging up that was just a beautiful work of art. And they're like, oh my gosh, wow, that's beautiful. I can't believe you did it that fast. And I said, well, I've done thousands of them. I know the pattern. I know the process. It says, but here's the beautiful thing. If I have the pattern, if I have the process, if I have the tools, if I have somebody standing next to me with the knowledge, do you think you could make that paddle in time? And they're like, well, yeah, absolutely. I says, but isn't it society who said that you as a drug user, an addict, although you're trying to change your life, they said that you should be locked up, thrown away, and have no value? I says, but with the right framework, with somebody who cares about you, who's willing to show you what doesn't need to be there, show you where to focus, things to polish, things to let go, you too can walk back out into the world with an immense amount of value that people will cherish to welcome into their homes. And not one single person did I ever walk through that process where full-grown men didn't hit the other end and cry, because they realized that somebody cared. And And then we taught him these principles that I had in the book. It's like, showing up and being consistent, doing the work, and how it compounds. And of course, when you understand the compounding principle, you're not looking for that quick result. You're knowing that every single thing that you're doing is working you towards your goal, your outcome. And so it's not a get to that point. It makes the wait worth it.
Absolutely.
Because you understand the value of not being there yet.
Exactly.
And I used to tell somebody, I says, compounding interest is like or compounding effect is like having money in the bank. This is the moment you get to the end and pull your money out, the value stops growing. Mm-hmm. I said, so enjoy the process, because the longer you're in it, the more valuable it will be for you in the long run. And so people weren't quick to try and rush through the program to get to the other end and get a certificate or something. They're like, can we stay longer? And we'd always tell them, it's like, hey, if you complete the program and you maintain being sober and clean, you're always welcome to come back here and help us mentor others through the program. And they're like, you'd trust me to do that? I was like, why wouldn't I? You're not the same person that walked into this program. Why would I treat you like the same person? And again, waterworks,
right,
where there was the change that happened. And I started to do this over and over through life. And I realized that our resources are inside of us. And I'm not saying everybody has everything they need to succeed. They don't. We have to learn.
Yes.
But we have everything inside of us to learn that information.
Right.
As Brian Tracy said, he says, if it's knowable, it's learnable. If it's learnable, it's doable. And if it's doable for you, it's doable for me. And I live by that principle. There's nothing that's unattainable for anybody unless they choose to not take action on it. And that would be probably my biggest takeaway for people is if you want something in your life, write it down and be clear. If you want to have more peace in your life, write it down, because you'll never find joy and success until you find peace. But write down what that looks like. Write where the end goal is, exactly what it looks like. What does it feel like? What does it smell like, taste like, everything? And then write down exactly where you are right now. What does it feel like, smell like, taste like, everything? And say, cool, now create a map. What things must happen to get to that next point? And the easiest thing is not to say, I'm here and I need to go there. What path do I need to take? The easiest way to do it is say, and I need to go there. Who lives there? And then go ask them, what got you to here? What was the last thing that you had to overcome to be in this position today? And they'll tell you the last obstacle that they had to overcome, because they like sharing that victory story. Mm-hmm. They're like, oh man, that's awesome. So really you had to be a better communicator. So what was keeping you from being a better communicator, and how did you overcome that? And you start walking that process backwards, guaranteed every time you always end with you. Eventually somebody will hit that point and say, this is where you are. This is where I was. And you say, can you help me get over that? Now you've got a perfect path that will get you right to where you be, based on a proven experience by people who have already overcome those obstacles. It's impossible to not succeed in that if you continue to move forward and continue to rely on those who've gone before you. And I would probably encourage everybody just to say, spend the time. People want the solution, but they never want to identify the situation first. Spend the time.
So true. It's so true. Everyone's in such a big rush.
Yeah.
Right.
You've got the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Take your time.
Yeah.
Because success is in the pursuit, not the attainment.
It's all about the journey. And then also celebrating every step of the way as well, right? Mm-hmm. Not just leaving the celebration to the very end where you think you're getting to that goal that you think you want, because I guarantee the goal that you have at the start of the journey isn't going to stay the same.
No.
To change as you go, right? So if your celebration is only around that original goal, you may never get there. So you never get to celebrate. Well, that's pretty demotivating, right?
Yeah.
So if you celebrate the little steps along the way and you're focused on that, then that's hugely motivating, because who doesn't love a celebration, right?
Yeah. I think you need to celebrate it like you celebrate your birthday.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody is in a hurry to be dead.
Yes.
Nobody likes their birthday because it makes them feel old, but everybody wants to celebrate it every time it happens. Like, celebrate the steps along the way and stop focusing on the end.
Mm-hmm.
Know the end.
Yes.
Like the Stoics would say, amor fati. It says literally to love your fate, love the mortality that you have. Because when you accept and understand that someday your body will stop functioning, you start to value and celebrate every day that you have. A lot of people say that's such a dark statement, love your mortality. And it's like, no, to love your mortality is to understand the value of our life.
Mm-hmm. I agree 100%.
I'm far from a stoic. I'm more of a comedian with a great perspective, but I understand those things. I've seen a lot of death in my time, whether it be from the military, some time that I was over the road. I've seen death pass. I've held my own child in my arms as no more life. It changes you,
Mm-hmm.
but it changes our perspective on things too. When
Yes.
situations happen, it can crush you or
Mm-hmm.
it can empower you.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a book that will never be published. It's called His Death, My Rally Call. When my son died at 10 months of age, I realized that he had done more to accomplish my life's work than I had my entire life, and he did it in 10 months.
Right.
And I was like, it's time to wake up and be impactful in the world. And never a day goes by that I don't say, okay, I have a purpose and a mission today. I will reach X amount of people today, or I won't go to bed. My son was able to do it, and he was 10 months. I can do it. And it's setting those standards for yourself. And I'm not going to tell everybody my number. My number is probably insane to most people. And to
Mm-hmm.
me, it's lunch, and then I'm done. But it's a matter of just learning what's important to you, setting a plan, putting it in action, and then not giving up. Make that decision, cut off all other options.
Yes. Burn
There's
all the
not
boats, right?
yeah. There's not this, oh, well, I've got a backup plan. Okay, so that's your first pick, but you just don't want to tell anybody. That's a backup plan. That's your first pick. You just know nobody will agree with it. So you make this alternate plan that you're really not going to do because you have your backup plan, but it sounds better and therefore you'll feel accepted. So just make a plan, stick to it, and move. And if something doesn't go right, you say, I should have had a backup plan. No, shift, readjust, and keep going. That's a decision. That's the difference between a decision and a desire. Desire says, I want it. Decision says, it's mine. I'm going to go get it. And that's what will change everything when you're moving forward in your life, is that decision to take that action. And when you do that, life will change. Be careful. It will change. Be prepared for it.
I love all that you've shared here today. And it's, you're such a great speaker and such a great storyteller that I've literally let you just go and share. And it's been wonderful and such a beautiful wrap up to the 3 podcasts on this theme that have come before you, because I know you haven't heard them yet. And yet you just tied it all together so beautifully. So thank you for that. And just all the wisdom that has come through your life experiences, through the stories from your grandpa, teaching you, and then how you've brought that together in the book on being better. And, some of which you've shared here today, most of which you've shared here today, mm-hmm. in such an easy way for people to understand. And
the key to complexity is simplicity.
Exactly.
Every complex problem in your life has a very simple solution. Just break it down.
Exactly. And so I know that you are also very generous in sharing this book as well. So I would love for you to share how people can get hold of that. We'll put that in the show notes too. Mm-hmm. And I do recommend people read it, but not only read it, to actually take action. Because at the end of each chapter, or even in some chapters partway through, you ask people to stop the recording, because it's an audiobook mm-hmm. or an ebook, right? To stop and do what you've asked them to do, and then come back and keep going. And what you get out of the book and the value of the book is only going to be as good as you following those steps.
Mhm. There's a simple loop, and I think if everybody could visualize this just for a second, imagine a circle with 3 points on it, and it goes clockwise. And the first one says action. Action. The more we do something, the more we'll become competent. Our
Hmm.
competency will rise when we take action. And when we have more competency, we'll gain more confidence. And the
Hmm.
more confident we come, the more likely we are to continue to take more action. This is the competency loop.
Right.
And so that's why I always want to tell people start with action. The smallest action, do one push up, talk
Hmm.
to one person for 20 seconds today, smile and start a conversation with the person at the register. But it's always about taking one piece of consistent action, and it will actually make you want to do more.
Yes.
You'll
100%.
desire it.
Exactly. And I 100% agree with that. We often will hear, start before you're ready, right?
Mm.
And that's really what you're saying there is take that action. You don't have to wait to be competent first. Take the action first. The action brings the competence. The competence brings the confidence. And you're in that positive cycle.
Yeah.
So, yeah, please share how people can get hold of the book and how they might get hold of you if they want to work with you in any way, shape, or form, whether it's through your story framework, your coaching, et cetera, et cetera. How can people get hold of you?
I'm a little bit different than a lot of coaches. I'm extremely accessible and extremely picky. To work with me, there's 2 qualifications in this order. I have to like you.
Fair enough.
If I don't like you, I don't want to spend time with you. And I spend a lot of time with the people I work with. And the secondly is I have to believe without a doubt that I can get you the help you or equip you for you to get the results that you need. Those things, 2 things line up. Then we can talk about coaching. But I tell people, everybody, the easiest way is chadnedland.com. Yeah, I'm
Super
not going to
easy.
send you to a website. I'm not going to make you watch a video. I'm not going to make you sign up for my email list yet. Yet. It's real simple. Go to Calendly, book a call. Because if you're interested in getting to know me, I will give you at least 15 minutes to half an hour of my time, and we will just talk. And we'll find out if I can serve you. Maybe you could serve me. I don't know. I'm smart enough to know I still need help in a lot of areas. That's the greatest thing I learned is the most brilliant minds in the world realize they don't know everything.
And
And I thought, well, if that's the case, I must be brilliant because there's a lot I don't know. Right.
I
So really,
absolutely
if you
love
want to
that.
connect with me or yeah, right. Because if you want to know anything about me or what it is that I do, just book a call with me and talk to me. I'm a very approachable person. I will make you laugh. I might make you cry, but I
Guaranteed.
will change your life.
Absolutely. And just today, you've changed people's lives just through this podcast, as you said, reaching out to 1,000 who speak to 1,000.
Right.
And you're absolutely right in terms of you can't possibly know everything. And this is always a journey, which is why I wanted to focus on this theme this month. And it's been part of the learning that I've had on my journey, because there was a time where I thought I would get to an endpoint in my learning. And then I realized, no, there's never an endpoint. There's always something more, right? And that's what makes it interesting. And that's what brings amazing people into your life as you continue on this journey and surround yourself with people that are on the same journey. So thank you so, so much for your time today, your wisdom, your sharing. And the show notes have the list, the link to get the book, so people can go ahead and download that there. And then I always ask 2 questions of my guests before I wrap the show. And so the first one is, what does "don't wait for your wake-up call" mean to you?
I thought a lot about that because you mentioned you were going to ask that. And really, I think about my son, Jonathan, when he passed away and writing that book, His Death, My Rally Call. That was my wake up call. And I look back and I said, if I understood that, if I understood that 15 years prior, how much more of an impact could I have made? How many more lives could I have saved working with the homeless? How many people could I have pulled out of the ditch and put them back in a home again? How could it, how would my life look different for my wife and my children now? I mean, it's pretty good now, but what would it look like different? I mean, who knows? We might be in another country doing the same thing, but serving a whole different nation at this point. Not waiting is going to be the greatest investment of your life. It's do it now. Not equipped, do it now. I learned a long time ago, if you start, the resources will show up.
Mm-hmm.
The resources will show up. And if we had another 2 hours, I could tell you an amazing journey that showed that part. But do it now. What it means to not wait means you're not wasting the opportunity that you have. Every moment that you're not living your life to the fullest, it's you taking the best and greatest potential of your life and flushing it down the toilet. Because you'll never get it back.
So true.
Time isn't a commodity, it's a measuring stick. And you can't go backwards.
Well said. And that ties back into your action and then competence. Do it now. Take the action. You don't have to be ready, but recognize your value and who you are, what you have to offer, and just get started. So thank you. Very profound. Love, love, love it. And my last question is simply, is there any other message that you would like to leave the audience with to motivate them to, as we've just said, to get started today? Step into their purpose.
I'm going to tell you, like I normally sign off. Remember that there is beauty, there is grace, and there is greatness within you today. Now go unleash it into the world. They're waiting.
Thank you. I love that. Very, very profound. So thank you so much for gifting us with your time, your wisdom, your brilliance, Chad. This has been super fun interview, and I really appreciate you making the time for this and for the audience. And thank you to all of my listeners for joining us here today, and share this episode with anybody that you think may benefit from it. And quite frankly, I think that means everyone. So get out there and share it. Remember, have 1,000 conversations, send it out there into the world, create that ripple effect, and have a wonderful rest of your day, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and just get started. Thank you. If you're enjoying my content and someone that wants to step into being proactive in your health and learning more, I would love to invite you to join my membership community. There's a link in the show notes. For only $19.99 a month, you get access to all of my content, and there's a lot, as well as weekly calls that you can come and get your health questions answered. It's truly priceless. I'd love to see you join the community. Check out the link in the show notes.